Okay, great. Well, I'm going to start us off to introduce our board. So everyone can see that, hopefully. We've got most of us here, I think, actually. So I'm Sadhu. I'm the board president. I got roped into this about a year ago now, thanks to Mr. Walker at the end of the table over there. And Aaron Ellingson is here, who's on the board. And Eli, our chief, is here.
Who's not on the board.
Who's not on the board formally, but sits in our board meetings. And Chris Walker is our vice president. Lisa Ferentinos is our treasurer. And Chris Dragseth is our secretary. And Dave Robertson and Wes Kirk have been on the board as well. And they are leaving the board at this point. So we're going to be looking for some additional board members tonight as a part of this meeting. But I do just want to really acknowledge Wes and Dave, thank them for their service. And Chris, I don't know if you worked with them both for a while there on the board. Anything you want to say to thank them?
Yeah, I mean, Wes was great to stick in, even though he left the island over a year ago. And Dave Robertson has been on the board for longer than anybody else. It's a great person for deep, long-term history of the whole organization. So thanks a lot for all of your efforts, Dave.
Yeah. Okay, I've emailed our speaker to let him know we're ready to go, but maybe I will spend a moment and just since we've got the time here to
Sadhu, may I interrupt? We got an audience here. Fire season is coming up. A couple of us still have burn piles and stuff out there. What's the fire department have to say to us about setting fire to our burn piles before there's a critical date? Can you give us an answer, please?
At this point, there are no bans for our region. I would suggest picking a rainy day if possible, and the sooner the better. Also, you're supposed to check the venting index before burning and make sure that it's either good or excellent, which can be found online through the BC Wildfire website.
Thanks, Eli. I've checked that venting index, as you and I had that discussion about a year ago prior to burning down our cabin. And that venting index, for what it's worth, I don't know if it ever has a day that it wants us to burn. But I know that CIFA does not enforce that, so I'm not worried about it. But those that do follow the venting index, it's I don't know when you can burn.
I'm going to interrupt you because we're actually ready to go, and thanks for that. Happy to talk more offline. I'm sure Eli is as well. But we got folks on Zoom and people in the room here, and really excited to invite John to present with us. And really thank you, John, for joining us today. You're really, really busy. I saw your video where you presented to the Senate. That was really blown away and said it would be amazing if we could get John here. Many of us that are at the table are also on the board of the community forest. And so there's a lot of overlap in how we manage our forests here and concerns about fire. And lots of us also work on climate change. So there's a lot of overlap here with the people in the room and the people that are helping to lead these organizations. And so it just felt like after fire weather that this would be a really important message for us to try to tie all these things together. We're a really small community and everything is woven together. I got to know John because we graduated from the same college. And so we used to get together, a bunch of us from Oberlin College in Ohio. And at the time, there was a city councilor as well. So we would all get together and chat. And I just have been a huge fan of John's for years, starting with the Golden Spruce, which I'm sure most of us had a chance to read. There's a lot of nodding heads here, John. So we're really big fans, and the fire weather. When I told Eli that I knew John and would approach him, Eli said, "I've got that book, and it's so amazing, and it's such an important message to tie climate change and forest health and what we're doing here." So really excited, John, that you're willing to do this. I've made you co-host. I know, so you can share your screen, and we'll be able to see it here in the room. And so, John, I'll hand it over to you. And thanks again for doing this.
For sure. Hello, Sadhu. Hello, everybody on Cortes. I've actually, I've never visited your island. I stood on the dock where this really nice lady gave me some food, and then I sailed away again. But I've never actually set foot properly on it. So I hope to rectify that sometime. In the meantime, I'm gonna share some slides, and I'm gonna chat. So can everybody see the images?
Yeah, we can. We can see the images, and we can see you. So it's perfect.
Great. Yeah. So first of all, I'm really here I'm not here to hear myself. I'm really here to serve you and try to answer your questions. And everybody is at a different place.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you went full screen there, it went blurry. So I'm wondering, maybe.
Yeah.
It might be our computer. I think you might have bumped something.
Did I bump? It's me.
It was when Lisa walked in front of it. It refocused.
Okay, sorry. Hold on one sec, John.
Let's see if we can get it to.
You know, there's a window up on the laptop there. Oh, there is. Yeah, notification on it.
This one's not. Oh, yeah, it's not relevant to this.
Are we good?
We can't see the slide, but we can hear you. If you want to
we can hear you, but we can't see the slide, and I'm not sure if it's a problem here.
No. Yeah, no, it says
Okay.
I'm screen sharing.
John, go for it.
All right. Are we
Just
doing it with
restarting our.
images?
Oh, no,
Are
we
we
can't.
doing
We don't have his audio either.
Oh, wow. Funky. Okay.
This is, sorry, John. Hold on. We are restarting the projector.
Okay. All right.
Just turn the focusing knob
It
on.
doesn't sound one.
Why does it even have a focusing?
That's too new. There we go.
You have to stand there like, don't.
No, just put it on the table. It'll be.
There we go.
I won't move.
Oh, it's working for everybody on Zoom. Okay,
Okay.
great. John should be good to go.
Okay.
And I'm going to get it back on the screen here.
Okay. You can folks hear me? Okay.
Yep, everything's good again.
Okay. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, right on. Okay. Hello, everybody. Again, I really don't want to tell you things you already know. So Sadhu or somebody feel free to jump in and say, yeah, but what we really want to hear about is X or Y. So I'm going to be kind of riffing here, but I'm here to be sort of corrected and guided. And so I hope you'll feel free to do that. I'd like to make the most of your time and mine while we're together. This image here was taken by a guy named Ricky Vasberg. I'm pretty sure it was taken from Fort Mackay looking south. And what we're seeing, that glowing dome of fire in the middle of the forest there, is the city of Fort McMurray burning on May 3rd. And it's an arresting image. A number of people who evacuated to the north said, looking back, it was like looking at a nuclear bomb explosion. And you know, this is trees and houses. These are not refineries blowing up. Nothing in the tar sands really burned, because there's nothing to burn there. It's been completely scraped off. But what we're seeing burning are houses and trees, and that's what the West Coast is comprised of. And it was about 33 Celsius that day, and so significantly cooler than what a heat dome is capable of. And the relative humidity, though, was around 11%, which is a lot lower than you're going to get on the coast. But low humidity and a slightly higher temperature, while we may feel them and we may notice them, wow, it's really dry today. Wow, it feels really hot today. Fire feels it too, and fire moves into that space that it creates. So there's a really good reason why fire weather, it's a technical term for hot, dry, windy weather. And most of the worst fires we know of took place on hot, dry, windy days when the humidity is low and the temperature is elevated. Fires don't really need wind because eventually they'll generate their own wind. This fire created its own weather system. This weather system was about 15 kilometers tall, punctured the stratosphere, generated hurricane force winds within its system, threw black hail and sent out lightning that ignited fires 20 miles away. So these are apocalyptic kind of end time scenarios. Pyrocumulonimbus fire systems were a rarity in the 90s. And frankly, I just got to tell you, no matter where you think you are in your understanding of climate change or of Cortes Island or of the changing forest, you are stuck in the past. And that is the greatest advantage that climate change has over us, is we are stuck in the past. We are basing most of our decisions is based on old information that is now outdated. And there's an analogy to that the advantage that climate change has over us in a way is the same advantage that the kind of Tea Party MAGA right has, is that it has no qualms about violating norms. And there are certain rules and laws of nature that we're used to around fire behavior and flooding and rain. And what climate change does, how it surprises us continually, is it violates those norms. You know, you thought 3 inches of rain in an hour was bad. Well, I'm going to do 6 inches of rain. You thought 15% humidity was bad. Well, I'm going to go to 11%. And 11% is Death Valley in July. And that's how dry it was in Fort McMurray, Alberta, 2,000 kilometers north of Death Valley in the subarctic. So that's what nature can do now. That's what Canada can do now. So all bets are off. So whatever understanding you have about Cortes Island, it's not accurate anymore. And the heat dome, really forced us into this new potential. It just kind of opened the bandwidth of what's possible. And so if you imagine a fire happening in the same space as a heat dome, you're going to have a Fort McMurray type situation. And so what you really need to be thinking about on islands, and ironically, the very first time I got dialed into the orange sky was camping on Hornby in 2015. And it was the morning, I was in my tent, and there was this orange light. Well, my tent's orange and the sun was shining through it. So I thought, well, it's morning in my tent. I crawled out of the tent and the light didn't stop being orange. And I looked up and the whole sky was orange. And the water was moving differently. There are tons of birds there. None of them were singing. And we're standing on the beach. None of us had seen orange sky before. And we're looking, and over to the east is this silver disc. And this woman camping near us said, "Is that the moon?" And then we realized it was the sun. And we could all just look at it because that's how thick the smoke was. And this other woman near us, who's about 80, she said, "Wow, it looks just like the sky did during the London Blitz." And that really, this was my first, this was ancient history. Had been no Fort McMurray then, there'd been no Australia fires, hadn't, so many of the famous fires that are now part of the lore had not caught ignited yet. And it was a really painful wake up. And some of you may have been on the beach that morning too, because there were fires on Vancouver Island, fires on the mainland. And it really messes with your head. And it touches you in a very disorienting, discomforting way. And so I spent a lot of time in that space over the past 7 years, talking with people who didn't just see the orange sky, but had flames, chasing them down the street. And it's soul searing. And so the big question for Cortes is not how you're going to, for everybody on the coast, is not how you're going to fight the fire, but how you're going to get away. And a lot of new developments. I really don't know what the development scene is in Cortes, but a lot of places that are built relatively recently just have one road in. And I urge you for your lives to think about that. If there's only one road in and it's on fire, what am I going to do? And on an island, where am I going to go? And you're going to, I was literally thinking, standing there with my family in my nylon tent, wow, if the fire gets to Hornby, where am I going? I'm not taking the ferry. What am I going to do? And, I'm going into the water. And I did a presentation up in Powell River in their new library, and it was standing room only, and people got turned away. And it's not because, oh, wow, John, we love your new book. It's, oh, wow, we are scared shitless about fire. And here was somebody who might have something to offer. And this one woman, pretty panicked, said, we don't have enough boats to get everybody out of Powell River, because they're effectively on an island too. The road ends one way in the forest, and in the other direction at a ferry. How, you can't run uphill. You do not want to run uphill with a fire, because fires can outrun you. It's the only thing on earth that runs faster uphill than downhill is fire. So you want to go down, you want to go into the water like they did in Lahaina. That's really the scenario. So that's, this is really painful to think about. We move to islands for the peace and the beauty and the nature. And so to have this potential there is it grinds the gears of so many of the reasons for island life. And I really relate to that, and I really sympathize with that. And it's super painful and really scary and extraordinarily dangerous when these things really get romping. And I was down in California right after the Redding fire tornado, and that was a tornado, and I can show you pictures of what that thing did, and you probably don't want to see it. It looked like frickin' Nagasaki. I've never beheld destruction that total. So this was, even what happened in Fort McMurray was terrible. The fire tornado was another level. So probably not an issue for Cortes, but evacuation is. And that's, if I was a firefighter, if I was a citizen, if I was on a board of anything, that's something that I would be thinking carefully about. And then the next thing would be kind of fire smarting. And but probably, if a fire gets going in a bad scenario where you've got 30 plus temperature, some wind and low humidity, you're probably not going to be putting that fire out. And so sticking around to try to save houses, I totally understand with the impulse to do that. And sometimes it works. But I think if I, was dealing with children and elders and the general citizenry, it would be to try to get them to a place where the fire wasn't, which is on the beach. So that's that. This is, these are some things that we might need to learn to recognize. This was the Fort McMurray fire on May 2nd at 6 p.m. Okay, it'd been a really hot, dry day that day too. It'd been hot, dry, windy for weeks prior. El Nino on top of that. So we'd had a couple of years of drought. elevated heat, surface was super dry. It was summer dry in the spring. So these dark coils you're seeing, that's the sign of a lot of energy and intensity. So just as you're cruising around British Columbia and you see a site like that, even though it may be safely miles away, really pay attention. And there's a lot of energy in there when you get those kind of ropey coils. And when it's dark like that in BC, it's either, or Alberta, it's either houses or black spruce burning generally. In this case, it's black spruce. It looks like a wildfire that, okay, that thing is really going, but it's not really our problem. This photo was taken from Hall 5 in Fort McMurray, about, I don't know, 6 or 8 kilometers south of downtown. It's many kilometers away. It does not look like an urban problem. And this is less than 24 hours later. This is Beacon Hill. And what you see, we're looking over the dashboard of a guy named Paul Ayer's truck. And in front of him there, where these fireballs are rolling over the road, is his wife and daughter. They're in those cars. And I asked him what the temperature, this is my great fear as a reporter, is I'm not going to ask the right question or I'll miss something. But at this moment, I had the wit to ask, did you happen to notice the temperature in your truck? And he said, yes. He said it was 66 Celsius. Right. And a deer on fire ran, this is all in the book, but this image and him telling me and him trying to call, he feels responsible. His wife and daughter are up there, their cats and dogs are in there. His son is at a man camp up north of town. He doesn't know where he is or what state the fire's in there. And he can't communicate with these very important women in his life because everybody else is trying to communicate with the important men and women in their life. The cell towers are jammed. He cannot get out because he'll be burned alive. And a deer on fire ran into his truck, like right in the moments that we're looking at this photo. And so that's how quick it changes. And we saw this in Kelowna too last summer. And everyone's, standing by the lake, looking at this ridge on fire. And I was tweeting, to whoever would listen, don't look at the fire, pay attention to the wind. And if the wind is blowing over you, that means the embers are too. And I coined a term in this book called 21st Century Fire, because it has properties that 20th century fire didn't very often. And one of those properties is the embers are just more volatile. And they last longer in hotter, drier air. They blow farther. And when they land, they're more likely to ignite. And that's the difference. And that is the difference between whether your home burns or not. If an ember lands in the pine needles in your gutter, it's over. That thing's getting into your soffits and you're done. And the likelihood of embers doing that now in a hotter, drier 21st century are just that much greater. And so think about it like virus droplets, somebody sneezing on the subway. Think of it like squeezing a puffball mushroom. That's what the embers are like. They're all little baby fires. They're little baby wildfires, and they're going everywhere. A bunch of them won't ignite, but if 10 of them do, if 100 of them do, you're in big trouble. So that's what burned a lot of Fort McMurray, was not the fire, but the embers that started new fires. So that's something to consider. And the other is that Canada has changed in a fundamental way. And so again, I was talking about pyrocumulonimbus fire systems. So these are these massive entities that puncture the stratosphere, that turn like hurricanes, that are influenced by the Coriolis effect, which is the turning of the planet Earth. That's how big these systems are. And they used to more often appear over volcanoes or maybe over a really big wildfire. Then they started showing up more often over wildfires in the late 90s, and they kind of entered the fire lingo, entered the conversation of wildfire right around 2000, the beginning of what I would call 21st century fire. Well, Canada, you know, which likes to think of itself as a nation that punches above its weight, generated last summer alone 142 pyro-CBs. So this has never happened on planet Earth in the history of the human species. This is a new world, and Canada is leading the way. And it's really intense. And that is, it's like one more damn thing that we have to integrate and factor in. And, you know, the earthquake is a big deal. You know, the big one, planning for that, that's a lot. And climate change is a lot. And there's all kinds of things that are a lot. And this is another one. And, you know, it's really big. And, you know, it's not guaranteed. It may never happen. You may never see it. But when it does happen under the right circumstances, it's incredibly fast. And that's, you know, that is kind of the common denominator of all the people I interviewed about 21st century fire. Everybody was shocked by how fast it moved. So again, if you see those dark coils, you know, out on the horizon, really pay attention to the wind and start acting, start responding then. Do not wait. This is another instructive image that only a firefighter could have shown us. And watch that fire hose. And, you know, this is, I saw a brief, I guess there's a community hall or something in Cortes where people are gathered watching. And this is a fire hose that could, you know, blow you all out of your chairs and send you out the back door. And watch how this fire hose is going up in between those houses and then bending. And what's happening there is the energy of those burning houses on the inner ring is so ferocious that it is taking the hose stream, sucking it in, vaporizing it, and just sending it up into the fire column. This hose is not putting out any fire, I'll tell you that. So this is what they had to resort to. This is 3 days into the Fort McMurray fire. This is May the 5th at about 3 or 4 in the morning. They're tearing down brand new houses to try to make a fire break through the middle. And if you've read the, you know, if you've read the book, you know about this. But, you know, they figured this out on the fly because the hoses were not working. They had ARF trucks. They had, you know, airport firefighting trucks, those, you know, low things with incredibly powerful nozzles and high water volume. And even those weren't working. So we're going to have to knock these houses down. And these houses are a year old, $500,000, $750,000 a pop, and they're just leveling them. So that's, you know, that's what it came to. And then this, of course, you know, back in 2016, this was a novel image. And, you know, we've all seen a house burn, and a lot of the house is left after it burns. And we're not used to this kind of total destruction, but this is more an expression of the heat. And again, if I didn't say it already, that the heat, the projected heat coming out of a Canadian wildfire is about 500 Celsius. So that's hotter than Venus. And it desiccates everything in front of it for hundreds of meters and starts it off gassing. And that's what the fire is burning. The fire is not burning the object. It's the reason for the heat is to heat the object up until it starts to vaporize hydrocarbons. So that's something to think about, is that all that projected heat, nothing's on fire yet, but what's happening, that high heat is surrounding everything, every house, every tree, every plastic swing set with this cloud of flammable gas. And so the whole neighborhood becomes something akin to an empty gas can full of volatile vapor. And that's what fire engages with. It engages with vapor. It doesn't like solids. It wants the vapor. The same way a baby doesn't want a solid apple, it wants baby food. This is the baby food for fire. And so that's why you see these billowing clouds coming up, spiraling up out of the top of conifer forests as they ignite. Those are the gases. And it's been superheated, and now the gases are igniting. So, and you know, this is what gets left behind. But this is another thing we need to think about, because we got another one of these summers coming our way. So fire radiative power, I didn't know what it was until 2023. And this is the raw heat energy coming off a wildfire. And a guy named Neil Leroux, amazing stuff is happening right now with satellite technology and its ability to sort of get a sort of three-dimensional understanding of what's happening above the earth. And that's really important with a pyrocumulonimbus fire system, with a fire tornado, with a regular tornado. You can see all the parts of it going up into the stratosphere. And so with satellite viewing, this guy was able to measure the fire energy coming out of the summer's worth of fires that beset Canada in 2023. And the measurement he came up with in terms of the raw energy coming out of these fires cumulatively was 42 terawatts. And normally, fire energy is measured in megawatts. A megawatt is a million watts. A terawatt is a trillion watts. 42 terawatts is what you run Tokyo on. It's what you run New York City on. It's an extraordinary amount of energy. And if you see these other colored lines in the lower right, those are the FRPs of previous fire seasons, which were quite intense. 2023 was just in a whole nother class. And Canada was there. Canada was in a whole nother class. And so this, the slide is slightly cut off, but I hope you'll be able to see it at the extreme. These are global average temperatures from 1850 on the left, going up to 2023 on the right. And we're in kind of a cool period through the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, and then it starts to bump up. And that bumping up, starting in the 50s, follows exactly the Keeling curve of CO2. And as we really started to lean into industrialization, coal burning and petroleum burning on a global scale. And you'll see that red line for 2023, it's really departed. I hope you can see it. It's just 2023 was in a class by itself. And if you look at any metric of planetary distress, the 2023 was a signal year, whether you're looking at Antarctic sea ice or glacial melt or sea surface temperature off of Florida or sea surface temperature off of Ireland or air temperature anywhere around the world. We're in a new regime now. We're all in it together. And who knew this was coming was Exxon. And this is an internal memo, not for public distribution, that was generated in 1982. So this is basically taking science from the 60s and 70s and coalescing it, aggregating it, and taking an educated guess at what temperatures might look like in the future. And this horizontal, this fat arrow, so we're starting at, again, back at 1850 on the left, going up to 2150 on the right. So this is projecting out by scientists hired by Exxon in the 1970s, who came up with this in 1982 and distributed it to senior executives. And this horizontal line is their prediction of average temperature fluctuation and stability without the influence of industrial CO2. This other arrow that departs and starts heading up into the upper right corner, right around the late 90s, early 2000s, is their projection for what would happen if we kept developing our fossil fuel resources at the pace that they were in the 1970s and early 80s. And they basically got it right. When you look at these temperatures on the left, 0, 1, 2, 3, and you look at where we are now, they saw this, they saw it coming, and they did it anyway. And we can see now, and I've gotten these quotes not from Mother Jones, but from the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the National Post. The way oil executives talk is they really don't care, and they're kind of done greenwashing. and they are taking care of shareholders and taking care of their profits. And Fort McMurray just cracked the 4 million barrel a day milestone that they had been aiming for. This is Harper's dream. So we're dealing with a really unreconstructed industry that really doesn't care if we burn or not. And that's a scary prospect. And it's even scarier to think that the Canadian government is really captive to that industry. So we're in a bit of a quandary. And this is Rich Kruger, the CEO of Suncor. He spent 30 years with Imperial/Exxon, and he said the quiet part out loud last summer: we're in the business to make money, and as much of it as possible. And he said this as he laid off 1,500 workers and sold off their renewable energy arm to focus on maximizing bitumen extraction. So this is something that took me 7 years to figure out, because the way we think about oil and gas, we think about it as energy. It's so ubiquitous in our lives that it's very hard to get outside of it and see what it really is. But petroleum, fossil fuels are fire in waiting. We are a fire-powered society, a fire-obsessed society, you could say. And the petroleum industry is a wholly owned subsidiary of fire. And that's an enormous liability. They cannot escape that. The only way they can make money is to pull fossil fuels from the ground and burn them or turn them into plastics. And that's exactly what our planet doesn't need right now. And so there's a wonderful futurist in California named Alex Steffen. He coined this term called predatory delay, the deliberate slowing of change to prolong a profitable but unsustainable status quo whose costs will be paid by others. So you could say that's kind of what the Liberal Party is doing. That's what the Conservative Party would love to do, keep doing. That's certainly what the petroleum industry wants to do. The plastics industry wants to do it. You make these kind of mealy-mouthed gestures around, we'll green this or we'll put up a windmill there, but meanwhile, we're going to keep burning, and it'll be somebody else's problem. And the fact is, it's our problem right now. There's no future, really. I'm not saying there isn't a future. I'm saying this is not in the future. We absolutely have a future, and that's kind of what we're trying to preserve here and prepare ourselves for. And I think I'll just stop there. But we're in the midst of a series of kind of predatory delay actions, and somehow we have to respond to that in a meaningful way that keeps us safe and sane, and is also reality-based. I hope something in there has been useful. I mean, all this to say, you might say, well, how do you get up in the morning? Aren't you totally bummed out? And I'm pretty bummed out, but I'm also totally galvanized. It was a really beautiful day here in Vancouver, and I have children, and I intend to have many more beautiful days with them. And that's I think that is the default mode of our planet, is to be healthy and regenerative. And one of the things I learned from writing The Tiger is when you stop killing things, they reproduce and grow back. And right now, our captivity to petroleum is slowly killing us, and we have to get off it. And when we get off it, I really think we're going to see a rebound, and things will be lost along the way. There's no way to pretty this up. I'm a realist, but I also have enormous faith in the regenerative powers of planet Earth, and I also have enormous faith in the creativity and resilience and adaptability of human beings. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, maybe stop sharing your screen so we can see your full, see all of you. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Thanks. And again, thanks for taking time with us tonight. do you have a few more minutes just for a question or
Yeah,
two?
for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay, cool. I'm really, yeah, I do remember that orange morning, and a few of them in a row. There was that one summer where it just felt like it was nonstop. Being on an island, we've been doing a lot with fire breaks and managing the forest. And, we had a fire last summer that, had we been unlucky, could have really gotten out of control.
wow.
And the team, we're all volunteers, right? Went out and fought it, kept it
Wow.
down to an acre. It was quite heroic, really, but
Wow, amazing.
it was a wake up call, in some ways as well. And I guess I was struck by what you said about the embers
Yeah,
as an island. Even if we can stop the fire that does generate here, and manage our forest, like how far are you seeing the embers go now? Like, are we gonna see, like, if a neighboring island catches on fire, are we gonna be seeing their embers on our island? Like, what do you have a general sense of what?
yeah. Oh, yeah. They can go for miles. And so, there's the advantage though, on the coast, it's just higher humidity is inescapable. And just because of the presence of the ocean. And so I think you've really got an advantage there. But embers from another island could absolutely come to your island. And so someone else's misfortune can, they travel like smoke. And, with a little bit of extra heat, and a little bit of extra wind, it's kind of, think of a sort of cigar, the way it burns, and then imagine how light a cigar is. And, you can get whole pine cones sailing through the air for quite a distance.
Oh.
And then, it doesn't, like, there were the firebrands flying around in Fort McMurray were log sized, the size of boots, and whole, shed roofs were flying around. And, that's unlikely to happen on the coast, but it really doesn't take much more than, a really hot pine needle or the very end of a branch, of something. And so that is a risk. That's a factor.
Yeah, thanks. Very sobering, for all the efforts we undertake, whether it's to reduce our own carbon emissions or to be prepared here. It's very sobering to be thinking about that. We do have an evacuation plan for the island. The board of the fire department and our emergency planning committee has been going over it and over it and over it. And, it's 2 days to evacuate the island with the
Yeah.
ferry that we have. Basically like 48 hours, I think. Isn't that right, Eli? So yeah, your points about evacuations are very important. I'm going to be importing for sale boats, in case anybody wants to buy a boat. Just kidding. But yeah, no, this is something we've been thinking about, talking about as a board. We're here to support emergency management efforts, which are regional, in responsibility and jurisdiction and funding. But also we recognize that as a fire department, we need to be thinking about that and evacuation. And we do have one road to get to the ferry, from the southern part of the island, which is kind of the most populated part of the island. So all the points you're raising are very, pertinent for us and important things for us to be thinking about. We've also, you mentioned that the ember that hits the pine needles in your gutter. We've been doing a lot of talking as a board and as an organization about just fire smarting properties, sprinklers on the roof and things that kind of create that dome of coolness. I guess in a situation like you saw there, does any of that make a difference, do you think?
I think so. Yeah. There's that famous red house in Lahaina, and it's surrounded by total destruction. And then there's this house standing there. And there was a set of condos in the Prospect neighborhood that didn't burn, and partly because it was surrounded by parking lot, and it either had a fire-resistant roof or a tin roof, but everything around it, was completely destroyed. And so some of that is the whims of the fire and the whims of the wind, but it really does make a difference. If I was going to build a house on an island, I would definitely go for a tin on the roof or some kind of really fire resistant material. And then I would not have vinyl siding, which also known as, solidified gasoline, on the side, and then really look at clearings, around the house, but also having and this is something that is tried and true in places like Slave Lake, is they have, these whole, and this is something actually you might want to consider, actually might really make sense, is what I would recommend is I would call Jamie or Ryan Coots up in Slave Lake, or, both of them have moved on since then, but they know a whole lot about how to make portable, quite inexpensive, sprinkler systems that run in series. So you could basically, you run up and it's like a Rainbird garden sprinkler. You nail it onto the front of the house, and it's attached to a hose, and it either goes to a water bladder or to a stream or maybe to a truck or a hydrant. And these guys travel with trailers that might have a mile of hose in them. And so you could do a whole subdivision, the outer ring of it, and get these, a kind of water wall going. And, they're not cheap to make, and they take some practice to put up quickly, but usually there's a certain amount of warning, before the fire gets to you. And people often leave it too late because they see the black column out in the forest. They'd say, well, that's a forest fire. It's not an urban fire until it is an urban fire. And so I think actually, if I was sort of in charge of fire preparedness for a place like Cortes Island, I would really think about these sprinkler series that fit right into a trailer. They're super portable. They're light. They're simple to deploy, and they're not expensive, because it's literally a garden sprinkler. And then you can also do that individually. Like we have a hose on our roof here in Vancouver, and I'm just going to take one of those, I forget what they're called, the sprinklers that go like this, and nail it onto the roof and fire it up, and it'll make a little curtain that will reach to the neighbors' houses, because we're all 6 feet apart here. It's ridiculous. It's a total fire trap, and the whole most of Vancouver, it will not be pretty, if it goes up under 21st century circumstances. So, but I think it's all really. It's like there are these sort of layers of thinking that we need to do. We need to think about how we're going to get out. We're going to think about what we're going to do when the ferry's full and there's still 1,000 more people who need to come. But we also need to think about, how am I going to protect my house in particular? And I may need to abandon that. But it's really like medieval warfare. You have these stages of retreat, and the first thing, you want to go out and confront it. And then if that doesn't work, you retrench and think about what those steps might look like. And the trouble with reality is it's never going to go the way you planned it to go, but still, the more scenarios you work through in your mind and maybe rehearse with your fire department, the more agile you're going to be in terms of adaptation. And that's how they were able to get to, actually, we got to tear all these houses down, because they had seen enough different scenarios. They were able to connect the dots more easily and realize, okay, no, this is the new idea we need to have. And so I think this is where Louis Pasteur really nailed it. Chance favors the prepared mind. You're going to get lucky. You're luckier. Your chances of survival are going to be greater the more you have studied the possible scenarios. And we've got sadly a superabundance of scenarios to work with now in Canada that simply weren't even there 10 years ago. What happened in the Northwest Territories, what happened in Halifax, what happened in Lytton, what happened in Fort Mac, blah, blah, blah. We now have all these different test cases that you can then kind of lay over Cortes Island and just see, well, that one fits. Yeah, that's one that would come up for us. No, we're weak there too. Oh no, I think we got that one figured out. And just look at them all, and someone's got to kind of go through that. But I think it can really pay off. And then also, it's just a little easier to sleep at night knowing, okay, we're going to be having a fiery fire season, but I know what my step A, B, and C are. E and F might be a little bit of a wild card, but at least I know what the first
Yeah,
steps are.
everyone having a plan, yeah. I've got one
Couple of
last
plans.
question, and then maybe if there's anyone in the audience that has a question, but I'm gonna let John go pretty soon. Oh, Eli's got a question. So just, John, you're an author, you're a journalist, and you've written this book, and you're presenting to the Senate. You're kind of really representing the confluence of these ideas and these issues that we're facing as humanity. What's like, how's that been? You're kind of, for yourself, like facing into this, sharing this message, these things coming together, this a little bit depressing kind of message around these things that we're dealing with, and how they're changing. Like, how has that been for you, being propelled into the limelight in that way, in a whole different way than you were with your other books?
Yeah, it's a whole different animal. And I, as I was saying to the person who was interviewing me yesterday, I do this every day. I've been doing it every day for a year, and in various different iterations. And that's totally unlike anything I've ever been involved with before. And people keep calling. And on the one hand, it's kind of alarming because it means, the world is more dangerous. On the other hand, there are a whole lot of people out there who really want to engage with this. And I applaud their bravery, and they vindicate me and the years and years I spent trying to come to grips with this. And it's totally soul searing. I mean, walking the ground around Redding, California, like the firefighter was coming back from his vacation to help with the fire. Tornado hit him, took him and his F-150, threw it up in the air, threw it into the forest, crushed it and burned it. And that's the kind of energy, and I walked around and saw where that happened. And I just never seen destruction like that. And the world wasn't really capable of that before. And now it is. And we made it that way. And so that is really, really intense to reckon with. We did that. And we got to undo it. We got to back out of this somehow. And there's a whole segment of the population that is not there yet. And Fort McMurray got built back in its same image. Nothing was learned up there, except we're going to have fewer employees and extract even more bitumen out of the ground. So we have a government that is stuck in 1850, and we got to grow up, and we have to evolve. And growing up is painful and not a smooth linear process. It's going to be a series of sort of jerks and spasms. And we're going through one right now. And so I don't know what else to do. The status quo is not viable. And so I'm going to go into it. I'm here for it. And I'm really, I'm glad is the wrong word, but I'm reassured that people on Cortes Island want to grapple with this with me. I don't want to be alone in this. Nobody does. We are an amazing species in terms of our capacity for inspired, powerful communal action. And islands, in a way, are some of the purest manifestations of that. You get to see all the dysfunction, but you get to also see all the incredible beauty and creativity. And nothing unifies like a catastrophe. And it takes a lot of mental discipline to prepare for one. And that's what you and your crew are doing right now. And I'm with you. And I'm a British Columbian who's invested in the health of the province, who loves this coast, and want to be part of its conservation and protection and ongoing, capacity for sustaining all of us.
Well, on behalf of all of us, thanks for what you're doing. I really appreciate that. Eli, our fire chief, has got a question, and then we're going to let you go. Eli?
You can hear me from here, but I'm wondering if you know of someone I can contact who is modeling fire behavior for this region that you think is up to the current task.
Did you hear that, John?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think anybody is. you know, I don't think I think people are talking about it. The community of Harrison Hot Spring, there's a guy there who read fire weather early on and really started agitating, and he got the Cootses, you know, those fire chiefs from Slave Lake. He brought them into a city council meeting in Harrison Hot Spring, and they said, you know, guys, we need another road out of here because we're a total fire trap. And so they are definitely grappling with it. They're grappling with some of the hard truths. They've actually set money aside, you know, to try to make some of these changes. And so if you like, I can put you in touch with this fellow Russ, who is kind of the spearhead for Harrison Hot Springs, which is a real fire trap. It's a real textbook BC fire disaster in the making. And Russ is trying to make it less so. And so those might be some folks. I think most other people are kind of at the stage maybe you're at, if they're even there at all. But you know, someone's got to lead the way. And I think Cortes has the IQ and the resources and the oomph to do it. And there's, you know, there's so much powerful juice in Cortes. So I wish there were other folks I could recommend. I mean, I don't know where Hornby's at. I'm guessing they're pretty progressive. But I wish I had a more tidy answer for you on that. And, you know, if there are other burning questions people have, like I don't need to be, it's 8 o'clock at night, I'm at home. So if there are other things that people, you know, that I can be helpful with, you know, I'd be glad to try to answer other questions or.
Great.
You
Yeah,
know.
let's go. We've got other business to cover too, but let's go just see if people do have burning questions. Mark Lombard, who oversees our community forest, is in the audience and has a question.
Okay.
And I'll repeat it in case you can't hear it.
Yeah, basically, like, what are his thoughts on forest management for like Cortes in terms of, you know, doing a little bit of logging in a sustainable way, but, you know, with an overlay of adapting to fire.
So the question, John, is, yeah, because Mark oversees the community forest here and is asking best practices on managing forests to address this.
Boy, it's really trying to return the forest to a pre-contact state, you know, where there was more regular burning, where there was a lot less density in the undergrowth. You know, what we need on the landscape all over the continent is quote unquote good fire. And you can literally see, there's a wonderful dendrochronologist named Laurie Daniels at UBC who was studying tree cores in Southwest BC, and you could see when smallpox came through because you can see when the fire regime changed, and it mean that the people were gone from the land. The people who burnt regularly every season, and then maybe every 10 years, it'd be a slightly larger fire. And but then it turned into, there'd be a 50-year break and then a really bad fire. And that's where we're at now because of, you know, this, you know, because of our century of quite successful fire suppression. There's just this superabundance of low-level fuel. And so the more we can kind of gradually thin that out, starting with around, you know, schools and clinics and homes, and then work our way outward and trying to get into a more open scenario so that if a fire does come through, it can just sort of stay on the ground and doesn't have as many ladder fuels to run up into the canopy and get a canopy fire, a crown fire going. So, you know, that's the goal. And, you know, that would probably be a 30 or 50-year project, you know, maybe a 100-year project for an island. But, you know, there's no time like the present. And, you know, just think about what I would do if I were you is sort of prioritize areas that I would want to get back to a pre-contact forest state, and which I would say would be trees wider apart with a lot less undergrowth, a lot less debris. And, you know, that might be around the clinic, around the fire hall, around the school, around the ferry terminal, and then kind of work out from there. And there might even be scenarios where you could actually have some controlled burns, you know, in the very early spring. And, you know, that's not unheard of. And there's a lot of it going on. There's a lot of people working with that right now around North America, in an indigenous way, but also in a more, Western, modern forestry practice way. And so I would think you would have some allies there, and that would be, but thinning for sure.
Thanks, Mark says. Anyone else have a burning question before we let John go? No, I just asked online.
I have one more question.
Oh, Eli, okay, great, yep.
John, one of the things as fire chief that I took away from the book is how unprepared the fire service and the city officials were. And it seemed like in a way, the most critical part was the failure of imagination. They had no idea it could be as bad as it was. And
Yeah.
what's kind of been gnawing at me since reading that is wondering, and this was my question about anyone modeling fire behavior in light of climate change for this region, but just a question of how bad could it get here? Like, what's the worst fire behavior that we should be preparing for?
That's why I kind of prefaced my talk by saying, whatever you think about what's possible in Cortes, you're probably mistaken, because we are so, and this is not a comment on people of Cortes, this is a comment on Homo sapiens and what we learned from, and we learned from past experience. And what climate change is doing is leapfrogging past experience and moving into these new realms in these very sudden and jarring ways. And so I would look at the fire intensity in the boreal around Fort McMurray, and look at the temperatures that were achievable, look at the wind patterns. I think a lot of what creates wind are temperature differentials and terrain. And so you've got a hilly mountainous situation on Cortes with these, I think, fairly tight channels between other islands around it. So you've got these real wind funneling systems. So you could get some really insane vortices going there under the right circumstances. And that's what started the Reading fire tornado, was hilly rather than mountainous terrain, with this influx of a high pressure system that came in over the mountain ridges from the ocean. And so you already had this, ferocious energy, and then destabilized by the variations in the terrain and the tight canyons. And then you had this influx of a weather system that supercharged it and enabled it to kind of metastasize. And an analogous situation, like if you got a katabatic coming down out of Desolation Sound, that could achieve the same effect. And I think the chances of a fire tornado on the coast of BC are, I would never bet on that. I would never, I think the chances of that are extraordinarily unlikely, but the chances of high wind and fire are real. And so, and that's where you get this weird synergy between the larger atmosphere and the larger terrain. And because there are big mountains relatively nearby, plus the energy that the fire itself can generate. And then you get these kind of chimeras, these sort of Frankenstein-like effects. And that happens in these really bad fires. And, I think Cortes would need to be extraordinarily unlucky, to have a scenario like that. What you're more likely to have is a localized fire, in some portion of the island that has the bad luck of being upwind of the rest of the island. And so you're really trying to contain that. But, the idea of, but you need to be open to the possibility, or cognizant of the possibility, that these other systems could come in and amplify it. Meaning the tight channels between other islands, and then some kind of katabatic outflow. And it would take, again, a couple of unlucky synchronicities to create that. But that's sort of life, is full of these weird synchronicities. And who knows what synchronicities conspired to help you stop the fire that you had last summer. And they can go your way too. And that's something to keep in mind. And again, that's where I think preparation, research, and one of my goals for fire weather was to show people what is possible. This is not an Australia problem. It's not a California problem. It's a Canadian problem. So anything that happened in that book could potentially happen where you live. And so if you, rather than freaking out and moving to Tokyo, but rather than thinking that, okay, this is a possibility now, one that I never imagined before, but so, what can I do to mitigate that? And there's a lot you can do. And there's a lot you can do, I think, to reduce by double-digit percentages the chances of a fire like that impacting your community. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Thank you. That's really, really appreciate your message. And we are, as a community organization, working very hard. And the rest of our meeting, we'll talk about things that we are doing to be prepared for the eventuality. And maybe everyone that's if people that are on Zoom could turn your cameras on, and maybe even turn on your mics, and we'll all give John a big wave off, send off, and applause for your time and all the work you're doing in the world. John, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for what you're doing. So thank you.
You're most welcome. Yeah, no, it's really my pleasure, and power to you and Cortes, and I hope to visit someday.
And the invitation stands. We'd love to have you bring your orange tent here, and your family, and we'll put you up, and love to have you come and do a book signing and enjoy Cortes with us sometime. So
I'd love it. Yeah, thank you, Sadhu, and take care, everybody. And if I can be helpful in the future, let me know.
Yeah, we will, definitely. Thanks. We want to be models that you write about in your next book. So that's what we're working toward here. So
I like it. Yeah.
Thanks
Right on.
again, John. Really appreciate it. Great to see you. And for everyone else, we're going to get on to the rest of our business. If you aren't interested in going over budgets and voting on resolutions, we're going to take a couple minutes to let you go without putting you on the spot. But we do have some other exciting business to talk about tonight. So please feel free to stay, but feel free to leave as well. So how about we take just a 5-minute break? Does that make sense for folks? So if you're on Zoom, we'll be back in 5 minutes. The washrooms are back there. There's tea and coffee over there if you're in the room. And we'll reconvene in just 5 minutes. Thank you all. We did. Okay, we're back. Back in action. We still have 9 people on Zoom, so some people stuck with us. Thank you for staying up with us in the room here. Yeah, so we've got a short presentation and then we've got a couple things to vote on. We've got a recommended resolution to change in our bylaws regarding members and member dues. This is a lack of clarity in our bylaws. And then our 2024 budget, which goes to the SRD. And we always like to get our members to vote on it. But we're going to do a quick presentation before that. And then we're happy to talk about the budget, which Lisa will do, and vote on that and the resolution, and then take any questions that you might have. So that's kind of the game plan. We're going to do it quickly. And yeah, as the board, we're here to represent you. And I feel really, as the board president, we've got a great group. Everybody kicks in. It's really great working relationships. And last year, many of us came on the board and were really concerned about the lack of resourcing. And given these various concerns, we did increase our tax requisition, which we all did kind of very thoughtfully, but recognizing that we needed to continue to attract volunteers and offer them benefits for the time that they put in and whatnot. So we think we've really delivered on that, but we also recognize that it was a big step for people to have to pay more. And so really, I'm really pleased that we've seen that investment paying off. And that's part of what we want to talk to you about tonight. So Eli, as our chief, is going to run through some of our major initiatives. I'll just give you a quick snapshot here. We have more volunteers than we've ever had before, which is great. And you can see there, we've got chief officers. So we've got more leadership at the top. We've got 16 rookie firefighters, which is really great. People coming up the ranks. And we launched last summer our wildfire brigade, which is a wonderful entry point because it's less commitment. And hopefully gets people into it and excited so they could become full firefighters. There were over 2,000 hours spent in training. So there's a lot of folks volunteering a lot of time. We had 87 calls, which is up from 49 in 2022. And that's largely a result of the medical first responder service, which is something that I've been wanting to do on the island for a long time. And we were able to launch this past year. And Eli will tell you a little bit more about that. And so we 47 first responder calls. This is a breakdown of the responses that we had. 7 hydro trouble, like power lines, motor vehicle accidents, 2 wildfires, 4 chimney fires, burn piles. Someone was asking about that earlier. 7 calls related to that. Fire alarms, 5. Duty investigations, and then 6 other calls. So that's a bit of a kind of a snapshot of the types of calls that we're dealing with. And while we've been doing the day-to-day things, we've had some very significant initiatives that Eli's been leading, and we're just really grateful to have Eli as our chief, and hand it off to Eli to tell you a little bit more about some of those initiatives.
So in 2023, we had a bunch of substantial items we were working on. We started off the year with an audit that we had requested to resolve issues around questions of governance and so on, brought up by the previous chief and the regional district. We were quite grateful to have done our own, and it showed that we had some work to do, but they were in essentially quite good shape. We launched the medical first responder service, which has actually been in the works since at least 2009.
Wow.
Certainly, it's been something that we've been working on for the entire time I've been on the department. And it's been quite gratifying to see that we're making a real difference in the community.
Do you want to explain what it is?
Basically, many departments, including now our own, respond to medical calls along with BC Ambulance or in advance of BC Ambulance, and provide initial care until BC Ambulance arrives on scene and takes over.
Generally, they're a little slower, right? Because they got to go get their equipment.
Be on scene substantially in advance of BC Ambulance for nighttime calls. Fortunately, the ambulance hours or the hours where there are ambulance attendants in the station have recently been increased quite substantially, but there's still an 8-hour chunk where we're able to respond much more rapidly. After the wildfire in June, the board got together to look at what we could do to increase our preparedness for wildfire in particular on the island. And out of that came the idea of forming a wildfire brigade, which would be members who were trained solely for wildfire fighting. So a much smaller commitment of time and department resources, and it was very well received. We brought on 13 members for our wildfire brigade, of which 4 have since become regular members. So it's also a great opportunity for people to kind of dip their toe in and see if it's something that's for them. And some people found they wanted to be more involved. So.
And we're going to be doing another one this summer?
Yeah,
Intake?
we're going to be advertising it fairly shortly. Our wildfire training this year will be second weekend in June. So we're hoping for at least another 10 members. We had a very successful recruitment last fall in September and added 16 new members. A few of them have dropped out of training now, but very, very strong crew right now. We also replaced our self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. It was identified a couple of years ago that they were no longer supported by the company, and we were unable to conduct the required annual testing and service. So with a combination of donations and grant money and a little bit from our savings, we were able to replace our entire set.
That was over $100,000. So it's a major investment.
Major investment, and they've now been in service since I think May of last year and have been serving us well. They're quite a bit nicer to use than the old ones too. We also, the board and myself, discussed the stipends and benefits package that we were offering the firefighters, and did some research and determined that it was quite a bit below the averages for volunteer firefighters in this area. So we significantly increased the training stipend, which is an amount that we pay firefighters at the end of the year to compensate them somewhat for their time and gas driving to and from the halls. And we also now offer a medical and dental benefits plan for firefighters who attend a certain percentage of the training events or training nights. Also following the June wildfire, the board created a emergency planning committee to look at planning for wildfire initially, but also wider emergency planning for the island. And actually one of the things we've been focused on is the evacuation plan. And we feel that it's fairly inadequate for the type of event that John Valliant was speaking about. So we're working with the regional district to try and put more effort into improving that. We would also like to see an overall emergency plan for the island, which doesn't currently exist.
So that's the tabletop planning exercise.
What's that?
The tabletop planning exercise.
It's been just a series of meetings so far.
There's one scheduled.
Yeah, we're hoping to organize a tabletop sort of evacuation exercise and wildfire exercise, but that's still in the planning stages.
And who's involved in those meetings?
Initially it was the board, and then we reached out to a number of other organizations on the island and people involved in emergency management in one way or another. And then we kind of merged them with the regional district emergency planning committee meetings, and that's where it stands at this point. Another major thing we took on last year, which is still in progress, is the province issued new training requirements for fire departments and such as ours, which are somewhat more in-depth than previous requirements. And we've been working to implement the new training standards, which is, I think we have 2 modules left to put our crew through, and then we'll be up to date on that, which is quite satisfactory. That's kind of it for the 2023 initiatives. For 2024, we have a bunch of stuff ongoing. We are replacing engine 101, which is a 1986 GMC fire truck that the department's had for a long time. And it's become somewhat unreliable, and also the fire underwriters survey doesn't recognize fire trucks that are more than 30 years old. So as far as people's own fire insurance goes, it's no longer considered to be a viable fire truck. So we have a 2013 four-wheel drive engine, which we're purchasing from a department in the States. And actually, Mark is going to be going down to pick it up later.
Thank you, Mark. Mark's going on a road trip. Yeah, he's driving our truck back. Eli was telling me we've been trying to replace this truck since 2009. So this is a very old truck, and this is kind of the main workhorse for the department. So this is a really big deal that we're going to have this new truck.
A couple other initiatives. Well, another one that's been ongoing for many years is working to bring the Tiber Bay community into the fire protection district, which we're optimistic is going to happen in the near future. We are also working on plans to upgrade the backup power at the halls. Right now, we have diesel generators at both halls, but in a prolonged emergency such as an earthquake, we would quickly run out of diesel. So we would like to be able to conserve our fuel for running the trucks, and it'll be more climate friendly, and it'll save power bills over time, and just seems like a sensible thing to do. So that's coming up this year.
And Chris is leading that. So thanks, Chris.
And so eventually. Another thing that's actually hopefully going to be complete this month is we are upgrading our water storage capacities for the fire department. So we have 4 new steel, well, new to us, steel water tanks, which should be delivered, I think, in the first week of May. And that's going to enable us to continue working towards Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accreditation, which is a process where the fire insurance underwriters verify that we're able to haul water fast enough to be equivalent to a fire hydrant. And we hope this will result in a fairly significant insurance savings for residents on the island. Another thing that is something we've been considering is looking at increasing our level of service if we can do it in a cost-effective way, and if we have the support of the firefighters in the community. The department here has always operated at the exterior service level, which means that we're not actually allowed to go into a burning building. And this is a concern because if there was a situation where there was somebody that needed to be rescued or a fire that could be effectively suppressed if we were able to go in, we're not allowed to do that. So there are fairly significant additional training requirements to be an interior operations department, but it's something that we would like to pursue, and hope to have more to say on this in the near future. We've also been working on a new website for the department. I'm not sure when our last one was last updated, but with a lot of good input from Sadhu, we've got one that's actually gone live today. So it's going to have a members area with resources for firefighters, as well as lots of information for the community and contact info. Resources for burning and fire smart and all that kind of stuff.
There it is. So I'm going to pull it up here.
And the final item on this before we get into the website, we've been exploring, the board primarily has been exploring the possibility of eventually building housing at one of the fire hall sites so that in the future it's easier to secure a chief for the department, because that was one of the issues the last time we went through the process. Is if we are to consider bringing someone to the island to fill the position, it's very hard for them to find somewhere to live. So lots of stuff going on.
Very briefly, here's our website. Oh,
It's on this screen. here on the Zoom screen. but-
Oh, it's weird.
Maybe you don't have the Zoom screen, maybe this is your PowerPoint screen.
Must be, yeah, okay. It's totally frozen up now anyway. Okay. So it's, people on Zoom are seeing the website, but it's not showing up on here, so I apologize. There we go. Okay. All right. Maybe at your leisure, check out the website. Had enough technical problems tonight.
It's cortesfire.org.
What's great about it is as soon as you go to the front page, it tells you whether there are any fire bans, because that's one of the big things people are always worrying about. And then it gives you real-time updates. So Eli from his phone can update the website. Like if there's a road closure, if there's a big fire somewhere, we can send a note and it goes straight to the front page of the website. So real-time information can be shared with the community pretty quickly rather than having to rely on going through the regional district or getting in with the radio or things like that. So real-time communications. It also allows members to know what the training schedule is, so everyone can see the schedule online. So saves some effort that way too. So it should be a really good resource for us during an emergency, which is during the fire that we've referred to a few times last summer. Communication was one of the big challenges, and knowing what was going on in this way, you can kind of get real-time information out onto the website. So should be good. Back to you.
I think that was it. I think it's, I think we're into Lisa's portion.
Okay, thanks. So let's see if I can go back to this. There's some photos of some of the training. And so financial metrics. I'll hand it over to Lisa. Do you want to go straight to the pie chart or?
Yeah, that's fine. So for 2023, we had a substantial increase in the amount that we got from regional district.
You can look at this one if you want.
Yes, that might be easier, sorry. And we also had a substantial increase in donations, and we did really well in getting some grant income, and then, you know, some minor stuff you can see there. But the regional district provided close to 70% of what we spent, but, you know, just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we are, you know, really active in trying to get funding from other sources as well. So we don't have to ask for increases from property taxes. Next. So this is how we spent it. As you can see, a lot of it goes to firefighter compensation. And as Eli described, basically the chief and the training officer are the only paid people, but the volunteers can get different benefits and stipends depending on their level of commitment to training and you know, other showing up at other events. So that is the, you know, the biggest chunk that we spend on. And then obviously the maintaining the vehicles and providing fuel for those vehicles. Next. So this coming year, we want to keep the amount that we're asking from the SRD even, but we are asking for a 4% increase to cover inflationary costs. But we felt like we did a really good job last year of being able to not only do the minimum, but also to increase you know, our capabilities by having that level of budget. And the SRD is really supportive of our budget as well, because they would, you know, obviously want to see us increase our capacity. So so far, it looks like we're going to ask for, you know, the 374. Last year we asked for 360, and that's just a 4% increase, and also a 4% increase in the first responder budget. And this is one of those slides that has too many things on it, but I was trying to get it all in one place. But basically, that if you look at the top left side there, you see the 2023 costs broken out into what we spent on what. And then for 2024, we split out between what we got, what we're asking for from the regional district for fire operational funds and also for first responders. And then we've also put in a column for the rent that we get from the BC ambulance. So we can kind of, show where the money is going from that rental income. So that basically, all of those things, the the fire operations, the first responder, and the ambulance rent, that will add up to just over 400,000 this year. But we also have grants. So if you look on the bottom there on the right side, we increased our gaming grant from 95,000 last year to 125 this year. And we also got the maximum you can get from the Union of BC Municipalities, and both of those grants are going to help boost up our equipment and training for wildfire. And then through the SRD, we also accessed 300,000 from a provincial grant called Growing Communities Fund, and that's going to pretty much pay for the replacement of the fire truck. And then jumping back over to the left there, the SRD also sets aside funds for capital spending for us. And because we were able to get that Growing Communities Fund to pay for the truck, we've been able to allocate that money to a couple of different things. As Eli mentioned, we're getting 4 new tanks, a solar backup system for the halls, and the rest of the funding in that capital account is going to be spent on other vehicle upgrades that will be coming up in the near future once we kind of get the new fire truck. So all told, it's amazing. I never added this all up till today. It's about $1.2 million that we're going to have to spend in the coming year. It sounds like a lot for a small place, but I think, we've all just seen from the talk that we listened to that, we need to think a lot more about being prepared. And there's a lot more requirements than there were in the past for training and equipment and vehicles. So we have to kind of bring it up to speed. So there we are. So the next thing we need to do is
Before we leave that, oh yeah.
Quick note that I forgot because it wasn't on the slide there, but regarding John's comments about wildfire protection, we have now received about $50,000 worth of additional sprinkler and wildfire gear purchased from the gaming grant this year. And we have a 2-day course coming up with BC Wildfire for home sprinkler protection. So we're actually making good steps towards what he was recommending.
And so the sprinklers that he was talking about, you put on your roof, we're going to be making those available at a reduced price for people on Cortes. So by buying them in bulk and using some of our grant funding, people will be able to get them through us more cheaply. Hopefully lots of people will put them on their roofs.
This is a good question, or
Mhm.
the future vehicle upgrades under the capital spending plan. Is that something that can be held in reserve for the future?
Yeah, we don't have to spend it all this year. It can carry over. And I think Eli can speak to what the vehicle upgrades
Yeah,
are.
the next 2 that are on the list are the forestry truck and the rescue truck, and we're going to be discussing that coming up when we would like to move on those. It's available now if we'd like to invest at this point, or we can just let it sit in the capital account.
Any other questions for Lisa or any of us about the budget?
And we've just gotten the financial statement from the accountants, and that will be posted when it's been finalized. But yeah, I just got that like 2 days ago. So that we used, these numbers are all the numbers that have been verified by the accountant. But you will be able to access the full info if you so choose.
Maria, as someone's saying on chat that you can't see the slides on Zoom. Is that still the case, or can you see them now?
No, you're not seeing it right now.
No, it's still at the 2024 initiatives on Zoom.
A couple slides back.
Wow, that's very strange. Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, it's back?
It
Now
was
it's gone.
briefly, now it's gone again. Now it's the.
How's that?
There it is.
Okay. So that's the graphic that Lisa was just going over, which is the 2024 budget.
Right, maybe you can just show the one before, which is a lot easier to look at. That one's sort of a headache, but yeah, the simple version is basically we're asking for the same thing as last year plus 4%. This is like all the breakdowns, but it's okay. You don't have to show it. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So basically what we're asking for tonight, and we were going to make a motion to have the association approve the budget request that will go to the SRD at their next meeting for 374 for firefighting operations and 22 something for first responder.
Okay, great. I don't see any questions, so I'd like to move a motion to adopt the budget as presented. Anyone second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I just want to say to Lisa, thank you for handling this. It's been a lot to wade through and managing as we're growing and figuring all these things out, what capital buckets are used for what. So as a volunteer, you're going way above and beyond. So thank you very much on behalf.
But
of
I
all
also
of us.
would like to give a shout out to Tammy Allwork, who can't be here tonight. She's our bookkeeper extraordinaire. And yeah, I couldn't do anything without her, and Eli as well. So I feel very supported in my role. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there a question? Dave?
Quick question about the 22,000 for the first responder program.
It's broken out into a portion for training.
Yeah, go to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look down, that third column over 2024 FR, it's going to equipment, supplies, training, and firefighter compensation.
I'd say at this point, the FR side of our operations are very heavily subsidized by the fire side. And I don't know if it's worth talking to the regional district at some point about balancing out the requisition so it represents more what we're actually doing or not. But
So the idea is to train more FRs primarily?
you mean as far as what that budget does?
Yeah.
It's basically goes into our general training pool, but we are going to be running the GAP course, which will probably use that up and then some.
Okay, we've just got a few more minutes here. We're going to try to get you out at 9, which is what we said. So we've done that. We've got a motion here. Like to amend our bylaws, and basically we want to amend the membership fee requirement. And there's something in our bylaws that say in order to be, it's a little unclear, but in order to be a member, you have to pay, and we don't feel like that is necessary. And so we are recommending to amend that, basically just, so the motion is to waive the membership fees from this AGM moving forward. We can look at it every year. So that's our recommended motion. Any questions on that? Okay, I move a motion to adopt this motion to amend the bylaws. Anyone second? Bob, thank you. All in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, great. So that is approved. And now we've got to have a board election. And so you see before you the existing board members. And so that's us, me, Chris, Lisa, Chris, and Aaron. And Dave, Robertson, and Wes have departed. So lots of thanks to them. And so we've been beating the bushes, trying to find folks that are willing to join or interested in joining. And we have 2 that have agreed to put their names forward that we are recommending. Mark Lombard, who's here, and Sandy Hoffman is here, I think. There you are. So yes, that's the slate that we're recommending, but if there's anyone that would like to, from the floor or from the Zoom world, to put their names forward, we're open to others. Is there anyone else that would like to be considered for the board? Okay, I'm not hearing anyone. I'm not seeing any chats on Zoom with anyone jumping up to volunteer. It's a wonderful group. Okay, so Mark, thank you. Anything you want to say, Mark, for your candidacy? Very compelling. Okay, great. Sandy? Okay, wonderful. They're both two inspired members that will be bringing passion and interest to the board, I'm sure. Okay, so this is the slate of board members that we'd like to bring before you. And is anyone prepared to move a motion to adopt these members? Chris? Dave, great. Okay, everyone in favor of tying us up for another year of volunteership? Okay, everyone's in favor. Great. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. Wonderful. So congratulations to Mark and Sandy. Your life belongs to us now. And thanks for joining. And to the rest of the group, thanks for staying on. Chris is, in particular, Mr. Walker was president for, I think, 8 years. So we really owe him a debt of gratitude and something else nice, I'm sure. But thank you for staying on. I really appreciate your wisdom and all your help as the vice president. So I think that covers everything in the meeting. So motion to adjourn. Oh, we needed to adopt the minutes from the last meeting. Could I get a motion to adopt the minutes from the last AGM, which were distributed? Bob, okay. Anyone prepared to second? Chris, okay. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Great. So that is adopted and we are done. So I just want to say thank you all for being here. This is wonderful turnout and thanks for your support for our fire department. So motion to adjourn, second. Okay. Great, we're done. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Watching this.